Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 25th episode of the Tick Bootcamp podcast. The title of today's interview is Follow Your Gut, an interview with Julie Richard. My name is Richard Johannesson.
And I'm Matt Sabatello.
Julie Richard is a married mother from southern Louisiana. She graduated from college with a degree in chemical engineering. For most of her career, she worked on elite teams for a prominent corporation in the petroleum and gas industry. Ms. Richard suffered from chronic Lyme symptoms for over a decade. She treated with over 30 doctors on what she called the doctor hamster wheel. Eventually, she received a Lyme disease diagnosis from a Lyme literate doctor. Since her diagnosis, she has made steady progress. Recently, Ms. Richard's personal battle inspired her to pursue a course of study in the field of nutrition and gut health. Her studies have resulted in her becoming a certified nutrition specialist. She has also formed a partnership with Amari Wellness. In that partnership, she is working to spread awareness about the importance of a healthy gut in the Lyme disease remission toolbox. Julie Richard, thank you for joining our podcast today.
Thanks, guys. It is so great to be here with you today.
So, Julie, can you share with our listeners a little bit about what your life was like before you began to show symptoms of a tick disease?
Sure. Well, I was pretty young, so I was in college, graduated top of my high school, started a college career. Initially, I was headed towards medical school, and then I kind of changed a little bit of that and ended up in a chemical engineering program, fast track program through college. I graduated in 4 years, and then started a career with a large petroleum oil company. I was newly married, a brand new mom, just getting out of college. So my life was super full. Very active, always on the go, did a lot of outdoor activities, dirt bike riding, trail riding, did a lot of water sports. I live in southern Louisiana, like way down south of Louisiana. So water sports, outdoor things are just kind of the way of life for us. So that was kind of my world early on. So I'm in my early 20s at that point.
So, Julie, what were your goals if you hadn't begun to show the symptoms of a tick disease?
So, I'm a chemical engineer by degree. And at that time in my life, I had pretty big goals and aspirations. You're just getting out of college and you're starting with this very large company. And, I had some goal sites set for, I'm going to be a refinery manager one day. I'm going to be up, way up in the corporate world. And so that was that's where I had my goals set from a professional standpoint. And then, from a personal goal aspect, I'm a new mom. And so you think, what does life look like? I've got several children and just goals for them as they grow up and, you have a family and all of those fun things that you dream of, as a young mom.
Julie, can you talk more about your job at the time as a chemical engineer?
Sure. So I went through quite a few number of jobs, but I took on large projects. I was kind of handpicked to be a part of an elite group that we were trained to find defects within our business, whether it was a process or actual equipment processes. We were trained, highly trained, to find those defects, fix them, and then that improved, the way things worked. It improved profits. And just to give you an idea, our group, we were 6 Sigma black belts. So I was a black belt in that defect elimination world. And I performed very, very well at high levels. I was kind of a little bit like a fish out of water as a chemical engineer working, a female chemical engineer working in a very male-dominated workforce. A lot of times you have to maybe perform at a little bit higher standard when you're kind of dealing with that group. In a refinery down in Louisiana, the workforce across everything is really predominantly male. So I was kind of a minority there. I worked a lot of hours each week, a lot of hours, like 50 to 60 hours. And then, managing, being a mom and a wife and having a family to deal with. So that's what my world looks like.
Julie, when did you first start feeling sick?
Well, hindsight is kind of always like 2020, right? You don't really connect the dots until you're way past things. But I started having like some really weird things just pop up, kind of in my early 20s. I would say early to mid 20s that we didn't understand, and we just would kind of band-aid them and then move on because they would go away.
What was the first symptom that you started to experience in your early 20s?
Back then, I started having these really horrible pains in my hip joints. And it wasn't like a muscle pain. It was like deep in my hip joint. And so I would always tell doctors, if you point your finger, facing your hip, and then you point another finger on the side of your hip, where those two points would intersect, like internally, that's where the pain was. And it would be in both of my hips, like sometimes daily. I would have heating pads at work. I would have heating pads at home that I would like sit on both of my hips. And so you can imagine, I look young and healthy, but I'm having these awful pains that I can hardly manage on a daily basis. And so we started, going to the doctors, and really they were like, you're young, you're healthy, there's no reason you should be hurting. And so it was just kind of like almost just throw their hands up in the air. I'm like, I really don't know what's wrong with you.
So Julie, how did it progress from there after that?
So from that point, so I'm in like, early to mid 20s. And then as time went on, I would have these weird things pop up. So one thing I developed was costochondritis, which is an inflammation in the joints where your upper ribs attach to your breastbone. And I thought I was having a heart attack. The pain that you get mimics the pain of a heart attack. And so, I'm like 25 years old, and there's like, I'm not having a heart attack, I don't think, but I feel like I'm having a heart attack. So it was really scary. And when we figured out what that was, the doctors, again, couldn't give me really a reason why I was having this. All they could do was just give me some medication. And it was like an arthritis medication, really aimed at reducing the inflammation.
And Julie, from there, you started to have symptoms that were on and off.
Right. I would have just weird things pop up, and they would, last a few days, and they would go away. And so you really just kind of dismiss them because you're, again, I was young, I ate well, I exercised, I looked like the picture of health. And so you just dismiss them away. You explain them away because they don't make sense. They don't make sense with anything.
And over that 10-year period of having these symptoms come and go, what were your doctors saying? Were they just bouncing you from one doctor to another, or were they trying to really help you and treat your problem and identify the root cause?
Yeah, no, I really bounced around from doctor to doctor. I probably saw it, from when I first started having the hip issues, I probably saw like 30 doctors, maybe more. I mean, I just got to a point I stopped counting. But let's see, the spring of 2006, things really got bad for me. I started having some severe abdominal pain, especially when I ate. It would get worse. So I kind of just stopped eating because it would just hurt. I mean, I would literally be walking like hunched over because I hurt so bad. I got down to about 95 pounds. So I looked really, really sick. I didn't think I did because you see yourself right daily, so you don't really notice those big changes. But other people were like asking my mom, what is going on with Julie? She looks so sick. So we initially got a cancer diagnosis, a pancreatic cancer diagnosis. Thankfully, when we got to Houston, of course, we went to Houston. That was our first stop in figuring out what was going on. I didn't have cancer, but what appeared on the imaging, my pancreas was so inflamed that it looked like I had a mass on my pancreas. And so at that time, I'm 31 years old. I have a 9-year-old daughter. I'm newly remarried, and we kind of had that bombshell hit. So that ended up with a diagnosis of autoimmune pancreatitis. Again, doctors couldn't tell us why. Like, I was seeing one of the top gastroenterologists in the United States, and all they could tell us was that you really don't fit into any profile that we have with pancreas problems. You're just kind of like, we kind of have to put you in this trash can group of idiopathic causes. So in other words, like, we just don't know what caused it. It just happens.
And Julie, throughout all this, you continued to work. You had a 9-year-old daughter. You were married. You kept living your life and pushing along, right?
Yeah. So I worked 5 days a week, 50 to 60 hours a week. I continued to move up, the corporate ladder. So I'm still, performing at high levels, really just pushing through. And so over probably about 10 years, I had 2 more children. I had 2 bonus children that we added to our family because I remarried. Lots of job changes. So now I've got 5 kids. I'm working a lot of hours. My husband is a shift worker, or he was at that time. So 4 to 5 days at a time, I'm a single mom because he's working either nights or days, which consumes, most of his time. So yeah, I'm juggling a lot of balls in the air. And that really, my health just began to deteriorate at that point. Not to get super graphic on your podcast, but my gut issues were like severe gut issues. And just to give you a little bit of insight into that, I knew the places that opened early on my path to work, my drive to work. So I would drive, bring my 2 youngest to a sitter. I knew every place on that path route, that drive to work, to the sitter, and then to work. I knew the places that opened early that I could use their facilities. That's how bad my gut was. And so it was very common that I would, have to make stops along the 30-minute drive to work in the morning. I couldn't get to work without having to make some stops. So that's what my life looks like. And then I would start running these chronic fevers, and they normally would last like 3 to 4 days. So I would get a fever in the afternoon. I felt like I had the flu. I would get home and literally just like not really able to function that well. I would kind of sweat it out overnight, and I would wake up feeling like, oh, I'm good. I'm normal. I feel good. And about 1 o'clock, you can almost set your watch to it. About 1 o'clock, I would start running fever again. And after 3 or 4 days, it would just go away for no reason. I had no reason for the fever, and then it would go away. So I'm still working. I'm working daily. I'm having fever. And then those cycles started to increase quite a bit. And so we got to a point in the spring of 2016. I started running fever constantly for like months at a time. And so we were like, okay, time out. Like, this cannot be normal. Right. And so again, I'm working literally, I'm running fever for months, and I'm still working, trying to perform right in that male dominated workforce. And really most days I was barely running at all.
Julie, can you give us an example of your brain fog and how that impacted you at work?
Yeah, so of course, I'll preface that with the fatigue that I had. Literally, it was pretty crippling for me, the fatigue. I was so tired all the time. And then I would have this brain fog. So what that looked like for me now this is a really bad day. Sometimes I wasn't even sure, like I knew how to get someplace, but the action of getting in the vehicle and direction-wise getting to a place was very, very difficult for me. In fact, I had several days where I would if I was meeting my husband or he came to meet me for lunch, I'm like, you're going to have to drive. Like, I just don't have the mental capacity to get there, which, you know, I kind of prided myself like, hey, I'm an engineer. I should know how to do all these things, right? And so having that brain fog start impacting me from a mental perspective was really scary. Just personally, right? How can I function, right? I can't even drive myself to a restaurant. But then in a professional standpoint, I dealt with upper management on a daily basis. I dealt with external government agencies frequently. And so struggling to find the right words to say. And I still deal with that even now, to a point, not nearly as bad as I did in the past. But, you know, I'm having to speak to people, speak to an audience, sometimes on a daily basis, and I can't get the right words to come out. You know them in your brain, but you can't get them out. You can't say them. You can't find them. And so that really started to kind of impact my performance at work.
Julie, when did you finally receive your Lyme diagnosis?
So I mentioned in the spring of 2016, you know, I had started that month's worth of fever, having constant fever. And so we started then, okay, let's start this, you know, like doctor hamster wheel cycle again. And I was very hesitant because I had been to so many doctors and they all just kind of were like, we don't know what's wrong with you. And so, you know, I was just kind of passed around. And so I started with just a general practitioner. I went to her. We were friends, acquaintances outside of her profession. And so I said, well, let me start there. We'll see. So she started running some tests. And at that point, I literally sat down and typed up like my entire history from the age of 22 or early 20s when I started having hip pain, everything that I had, because I'm like, okay, it's too hard to explain. And so I literally typed it out, and it was like 2 pages worth of stuff. And I would just hand it to the doctor. So at that point, I kind of started thinking like, okay, maybe there's like a connection between all of these issues. And so we saw her, she ran a bunch of tests, and she was like, hey, I'm just a general practitioner. I don't know a lot, but I think there's something going on with you. And so she referred me to a rheumatologist, and they ran, oh my gosh, like vials and vials and vials of blood. I don't even know what all they tested me for, tons and tons of stuff. And she actually ran the initial Lyme testing on me. I had never heard of Lyme disease. I didn't really know anything about it. And so that kind of started that journey. And this was her words. She's like, there is definitely something wrong with you, but I have no idea what it is. And she wanted to treat me with low-dose chemotherapy drugs to really suppress my immune system. And I'm like, I didn't have peace about that, because I'm like, a chemo drug? You don't even know what's wrong with me, but you want to treat me with a chemo drug. Time out. Let's try and figure out what's going on before we get to that point. So we kind of took a break from doctors at that point. We're talking like, that was probably August, September timeframe. Took a break, and we're just trying to figure out the pieces. I stopped working like in June of 2016 at the advice of doctors, because they're like, we've got to get you to a better state. You can't continue doing this to your body. And so we started doing a bunch of researching and connecting with people, and I got connected with a doctor in Louisiana who treats Lyme disease. And so I said, well, let's start there. We've got some testing. And that's really where the diagnosis, he confirmed that diagnosis. I believe it was like October timeframe of 2016. He did some additional blood tests that the CDC recognizes, and he said, yeah, you've got, the blood test confirms it, your symptoms confirm it, and so that's when we got that diagnosis.
So, Julie, before you share with our listeners your healing plan that you embarked upon after you finally got your Lyme diagnosis, can you share with our listeners whether or not you knew anything about ticks prior to your illness?
So the only thing I really knew about ticks were, I live in Louisiana. We're outdoors a lot. When I was little, growing up, younger, we would be at my grandparents out in the woods. And the only thing, we were worried about red bugs. People, if you're in the South, you know what a red bug is. And kind of ticks. And so, my mom would kind of look at us, make sure we didn't have any ticks on us. But the only ticks I really knew about was like a dog tick, right? So we didn't really have dogs, but I knew about dog ticks, and that was all I knew about it.
So did you or your family take any steps to protect yourself from coming in contact with ticks?
I mean, no, honestly, we would spray for mosquitoes, because that's the big concern in Louisiana, is just the mosquitoes are horrible because we have such rainy weather and it's hot. And so we would spray for that. And sometimes, or long sleeves, long pants. But really, we didn't, because it was just, nobody even heard of Lyme disease. I didn't even hear that word until like 2016. So no, we didn't.
Julie, do you think it's possible that you may have had more than one tick bite, meaning one during your childhood and perhaps coming in contact with ticks professionally when you were working as a chemical engineer?
Of course, that's possible, especially as a kid. We went to Colorado frequently. My aunt and uncle lived there. And so as a teenager, we spent summers in Colorado, lots of outdoor activities. And again, we didn't know there was any connection with ticks and diseases. And so we didn't, prepare to protect ourselves from that. And I've had that discussion with my Lyme doctor now. I don't remember having this, bullseye rash. I don't remember any of that. I don't remember having a tick on me. And that's what, he said most people in his practice of seeing, and he's seen hundreds and hundreds of Lyme patients, he said most people don't know when they were bitten. They never had a rash. And so it's trying to, put the pieces together of when.
So Julie, now you have this diagnosis of Lyme disease. You finally know what's causing your symptoms. What treatment plan did you follow at that point?
So the doctor I was seeing in Louisiana, he started me kind of on that usual treatment with antibiotics. He kind of estimated the number of years he believed I had chronic, really just based on my symptoms. And so that equated to like several years of antibiotic treatment. And we're talking like not just amoxicillin type of antibiotic. We're talking about doxycycline, Flagyl, Ceftin, Omnicef, all like lots of antibiotics. And we're not just talking about one. We're talking about sometimes up to 5 that we would stack. And so what that looks like is I would be in like a rotation. So I would take 2 for 4 days. And then over the weekend, I would stack in 1 to 2 more for several days. And then I would go back to the 2 a day for 4 days. So it was cyclic. It was multiple antibiotics that we would rotate in and out of. I did mention already that I had these other autoimmune issues, autoimmune pancreatitis. I developed ulcerative colitis. So it was really, really tricky to try and manage those antibiotics with the other autoimmune issues that I already had that we were trying to manage and keep, kind of keep those calm because I didn't need anything else to have to deal with.
Julie, although the CDC doesn't recommend using the CD57 blood test to see how you're progressing with your Lyme treatment, you had used it and it worked well as an indicator to see how much you're progressing and how fast you're progressing with your treatment. Can you talk a little bit about that for us?
Sure. So when I initially started with my Lyme doctor, he ran a test, the CD57, not for a diagnosis basis. I want to make sure, we're clear on that. He did not use that as a diagnosis, but he used it so that we could judge how my treatment was going, how I was improving with treatments, and then we could make shifts and changes to that. So CD57 measures these killer cells that are in your bloodstream, and those killer cells are really targeted at like diseases that you get and issues that your body is trying to fight off. And so a normal healthy person has a level of about 200. My initial test, I was 18. So I was very, very low. And when you look at the scale of a CD57 test, that low of a number is like in a chronic illness state. And so my doctor was really amazed that I was even functioning at any level. His words were, you should be like in bed all the time, not able to function at any degree. And so we repeat that test about every 6 months just to kind of see where I'm tracking. And I'll be like, his target is to get me to 100, which is only half of what a normal healthy person has. And we're not there yet. And so we've been on this journey for, a couple of years now.
So at what point did you decide to move away from the antibiotics and look at, other ways to treat the symptoms and the Lyme disease?
So I started, I had some flare-ups with my pancreas, which I've already had a really major surgery on, called a Whipple. Most people have that when they have pancreatic cancer. And so I'm missing about 40% of my pancreas already. So I'm very, very protective of what's remaining for several reasons. One, I don't want to develop diabetes, which is very common in pancreas patients. So I'm super protective of my pancreas. And then I also have the ulcerative colitis, which, again, I have to be really protective of that, of my gut and my colon. And so, I'm taking all of these like pills. I'm really feeling pretty raunchy most of the time. And we just really struggle to wrap our heads around like all of these pills all the time. And so probably after about 6 months, we started looking into some alternative type treatments, more holistic in nature. How can I better support my body to help it heal? And so we've done quite a few different protocols. I've worked with holistic doctors across the country. And so some of those things, I did some high doses of vitamin C. We've done different herbs aimed at really addressing and getting rid of the biofilm on the parasite, which we know is really important. If we can kill the parasite, we've got to get rid of that covering, that biofilm that they use to protect themselves. That's why Lyme is so hard to treat, because they're pretty sneaky. They like to hide, and they can change their shape, which makes it really, really hard to treat.
So Julie, one treatment that you had got was the focus on your vagus nerve and your gut health. And that was a really interesting treatment. Do you mind sharing that with our listeners in some detail?
Yeah, so let's see, I'm going to say January of last year, so January of 2018, I had a horrible winter. And I don't know if this is true for you, Matt, but winters are always really bad for me. The Lyme parasites like the cold, and so they really thrive in cold temperatures. And winters are just awful for me. And we had a really cold winter for Louisiana. We had 2 snows that season, which is very uncommon for Louisiana. And anyway, I felt horrible. And so in March, I connected with a chiropractor that I had heard some good things about. He was doing some alternative therapies to help people with lots and lots of different conditions. And so I'm kind of like, well, what's it gonna hurt, right? Let me go see him and see what he says. And so he was very out of the box. It was not something I had ever heard from a doctor or chiropractor that I had worked with in the past. And he said, your gut's broken. You have this crazy thing called a vagus nerve that connects your gut and your brain, and it's broken too. And so that's what we're going to work on. And so we started some pretty intense treatments and therapy, 3 days a week. I did light therapy. I did sound therapy. I did some vibration therapy even. Made some really big diet shifts to get my gut healthier. And then the other therapies that we did were really focused on getting my vagus nerve toned. And so what that means is just getting it working at a higher level.
Julie, as a chemical engineer, did it make sense to you that the challenges that you were facing at that time were related to your vagus nerve and your gut health?
Well, when he initially kind of threw those words out at me, I didn't know anything about it. But of course, I was super curious, so I started asking him a ton of questions. I kind of geeked out a little bit on him, and started reading as much as I could about gut health and the connection with the vagus nerve, how it all works, and then how it can impact, for good or for bad, your immune system. And so, yeah, I learned a ton about it, and it made so much sense that it was kind of like, this is the missing link. Like, this is what I've been looking for and researching and digging for like 12 years, basically.
So how have you changed since you discovered the vagus nerve and the treatment protocol that you're now using to heal yourself?
So it's been about a year, a little over a year. And wow, major shifts in how I feel. I would say for an average, I'm probably like 90% back to normal. It's not perfect. I mean, I still have days where I don't feel good. But what I'm finding is that I rebound way quicker than I used to when I was having a flare-up. It's not as bad, so the severity is a lot less, and it doesn't last as long. So what used to when I would have a flare-up, I mean, it would be weeks. Now it's like a couple of days. And I know the things that I can shift in my protocol to support me when I am having, some bad days. And then I bounce back so much quicker. And so I'm back up and kind of back to normal in a couple of days, not weeks.
Julie, are you still currently taking anything to treat the Lyme and the symptoms from the Lyme?
So right now we're doing only holistic type treatments to support my body. And the majority of those are gut health focused. Gut health and vagus nerve support. And I will say, like, the changes I've seen, the physical changes have been huge, but my husband and my kids are like, wow, you're so much nicer to be around. You're such, a happier, more joyful person to be around than you used to be. And we know, like when you're dealing with autoimmune conditions, you can get pretty cranky and crabby with people because you just don't feel good, right? And so those have been like some of the great things that I'm seeing now. Like, as a mom, you want to be a good mom to your kids and not so cranky to be around all the time. So that's been a fun shift for me to have.
So Julie, we understand that this whole Lyme experience that you've had has caused you to make a transformation. And one of the elements of your transformation is you've become a certified nutritional specialist. Can you share with our listeners how that became a part of your journey?
Yeah, so, it was such a huge part in my healing when we started focusing in on gut health and the vagus nerve, and it actually connects your gut to your brain. And so I started digging into the nutrition aspect of healing and how can we heal from a nutrition standpoint. And that started my journey about a year ago into a certification as a nutritional specialist with a very specific focus on autoimmune conditions. So that covers a spectrum, any type of autoimmune condition, which includes Lyme disease, that we can help people heal, help their bodies heal from that nutrition aspect. And a large part of that is how do we heal the gut? And so we look at good support for gut health, inflammation, reducing foods and nutrition. And so it's been a great transition for me because I have such a long history of really a fight. It was a war, and we're still kind of warring with it, but I'm on the winning side now versus before I was not winning at all. It was in control, and now I'm in control, and I can help support my body to heal.
Julie, you noted that a lot of the information out there is overwhelming and disjointed and very difficult to consume. So you've taken it upon yourself to go out there and actually talk with people across the United States and help them with their journey, correct?
Yes. Yeah, it's, when I first started in the Lyme world, my gosh, when you go Google that, there's just so much information. I mean, even I, as an engineer, I'm used to dealing with a lot of, information and deciphering what it means and how can we simplify it. And even for me, I was so overwhelmed with all of the information. And so that's been a big focus for me is how can we simplify that? And so make some simple changes that people can connect with in their journey to help them heal and move forward.
Julie, I think one of the things that you said that was so powerful for us offline was that in regard to having to be able to connect to somebody on the same level, that you found it's almost impossible for others, even close family members who don't have Lyme, to understand what you're going through. And I think so many of our listeners can relate to that. And it's so important to be able to speak to somebody who can understand truly what they're going through. Yeah,
that was so important to me. And even our doctors, right, that we see, because I grew up thinking like, oh, if I just go to the doctor, they can fix it, right? They'll understand what I need or what I'm going through and they can fix it. And that wasn't happening. And then I've got my sweet husband who has been just a pillar for me through all of this. He couldn't even understand it. It's not his fault, but just when you've not gone through that process and you've not dealt with like the symptoms and the just how you feel health-wise and emotionally and mentally and just all the aspects of health, if you've not gone through it, it's so hard for people to understand, like truly understand what you're going through. And so I encourage people like, and when you're trying to get information, it's so overwhelming. And a lot of times you just feel paralyzed. And so you're just kind of stuck. You can't do anything because it's so much. And so I encourage people, like, find a community in your area, a Lyme community. Some places have them, some don't, like a support group. If you can't find one, connect with me. I connect with people all over the United States to help them, to give them nutritional support, things that they can do to help them find solutions, right? I help them connect their dots, and then they can get started on that right path to healing.
Julie,
connect with someone. That's my advice. Find somebody and connect with them.
And you've actually created an Instagram that's, I think, beautifully done, that helps people to connect with you and helps people to connect with some of the partnerships that you've developed. Can you share with our listeners what motivated you to start your Instagram and what partnerships you started to try to help people to get an easy button to nutritional health?
Yeah, so, I started sharing some of my story really with people just on a one-to-one connection. I knew that I needed to start sharing that story more broadly. And so that's where, I started being more active on social media. And then through my work with my chiropractor, we had focused so much on my gut health and my vagus nerve. When we started nearing the end of treatment, I knew I needed something to support me going forward, because I did not want to go backwards, right? I wanted to stay where I was and then even continue to get better. And so I got connected with an amazing company who used science to develop some products that were very focused on gut health and looking at what we were missing in our gut very specifically, and how do we get that reintroduced and thriving so that our guts are working really well and our vagus nerve is working on all 10 cylinders to help our bodies heal. And so Amare is a brand new company that I partnered with really to help get their mission out, to get the message out that we have solutions for people. And it's easy solutions that you can implement into your daily routine. And we're having, as a nutritionist helping people, we're having so much results, so many good results and great testimonies of people as they heal their gut, they're healing their physical health, they're healing their mental health as well. And so it's just been a beautiful journey over the last year.
Julie, as discussed earlier before the podcast, we're going to have a separate podcast episode just to discuss this particular aspect of your healing so we can help so many of our listeners heal their gut and continue their healing journey. But thank you so much for joining the podcast today. You have been such an inspiration.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here with you guys, and I look forward to partnering with both of you moving forward to help educate your listeners and give them great solutions to support their bodies. Simple solutions, radical results.
Thank you for listening to the Tick Bootcamp interview with Julie Richard. To our listeners, we have a call to action. First, if you would like to learn more about Julie Richard, please visit her Instagram at Ms. Julie Richard, MsJulieRichard. Second, if you enjoyed this episode of the Tick Bootcamp podcast interview with Julie Richard, please share it with your friends by using the social media buttons you see at the bottom of the post. Third, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play Music, or Spotify to get the automatic episode updates from our Tick Bootcamp podcast. And finally, please take a minute to leave us an honest review and rating on iTunes. This is a new effort on our part, and we can really use your help when it comes to creating a show that you would like to listen to. We make a point to read every single one of the reviews we get. Thank you for listening.